Hello, Singapore. So yes, today we'll be talking about diversifying your product through internationalization, but before we begin, I just wanted to give a quick introduction to who I am and why I'm talking to you about this. So I'm currently a front-end developer at Cloudflare. If you haven't heard of us before, we are an internet security and web performance company based in San Francisco, California. And since we're on the topic of diversity, I also wanted to highlight the fact that I'm not only a developer, I'm also a watercolor artist and printmaker. So here's one of the paintings I did a while back of a lucky cat. And many moons ago, I was not always a developer. I was actually working at a biofuels laboratory doing biofuels research. So if you see me around, feel free to talk to me about code and art, and feel free to stop by our booth at Cloudflare because we're actually hiring for Singapore office. And so, hello everyone, my name is Millie Chan, and I wanted to tell you a quick little story. So I started at Cloudflare around a year ago, and during my first week at Cloudflare, I knew nothing about internationalization. Like, none of the words made any sense to me, and I had no idea about what this existed. So the founder of Cloudflare came into our orientation room, and she introduced me to everybody and said, "This is Millie. She's going to localize our customer dashboard." And my response was pretty much, yes, absolutely, I'm totally going to do that, without knowing whatever she was talking about. And when she looked away, I opened up my laptop and then started Googling what localization meant. And so hopefully, by the end of this talk, you'll have learned something cool that would be helpful for you, so you don't have to repeat this face when the time comes for you to localize and internationalize your code base. So here's a quick roadmap of what we'll be talking about today, the why, what, and how of internationalization. So let's define some terms first. So what exactly is internationalization? I like to think about it as the infrastructure piece of software that needs to be built so that it can support multiple locales and languages and cultural settings. So here's a real-world example of internationalization. And by the way, the shorthand for that is I-18N. So you can think about it as a street sign pole. This is one from Oakland, Chinatown in California. And you can think about the internationalization piece as the physical bolts and hinges that are holding up the two different signs in two different languages. And on the flip side, we have localization. Shorthand is L10N. So you can think about localization as the process of making your product very specific to a region. So in this case of the street sign pole, you can think about the localization part as the actual text that has been translated into Chinese, because the region has a lot of Chinese speakers. So I-18N, the physical bolts and hinges that are holding up, so infrastructure piece, and then L10N is the actual translation piece. So now that we have the terms, why are we talking about I-18N? Why is this important? And so when I was Googling stuff, I only see that it's 2019, and somehow we're still only talking about diversity in terms of how much money it's producing for companies. But I don't actually see a lot of examples as an engineer of how this manifests through product code and decisions. And I wanted to use this opportunity to just dive deep and see what actually changes when you internationalize your code base. And so as a high level, what does internationalizing your code base actually do? So of course it builds user empathy in developers. It's really easy as a developer to just crush tickets all day for work and forget about the human that you're building an interface for on the other side. And so during this process of I-18N, it'll force your developers to actually think about the human aspect of it, so that they don't just build for robots, basically. And second, as your company scales, you're going to be entering into new global markets. And with that, you'll have new diverse challenges. And as you build your product for a more diverse set of challenges, your product quality will also increase at the same time. And as an engineer, you might be thinking, why are you talking about this? Why can't we just use machine translation or Google Translate? This technology already exists. And the short answer is that the technology works, but it's not quite there yet. It's missing a lot of context, and if you speak different languages, you know that context is key to understanding exactly what is going on. And as much as tech wants to erase humans from this process and just automate everything, we're not quite there yet. We still need to rely on translators to provide the human context. And it gets even worse when you're translating for complicated like technical websites. There is just no like direct translation sometimes. So let's look at where this fails in real life. So disclaimer, Cloudflare is a very technical website. So a lot of translations don't actually come out the right way. So we had a user that had his website breaking. He was freaking out because he wanted to change a security setting but couldn't find it. So he used Google Translate on our website and was looking for the word full. And once he used Google Translate, it turned into the word complete in his language. And now in English, that looks pretty similar. And like it's very subtle, the difference between full and complete. But when you're speaking in a technical context, it's completely lost. Like full could mean one thing, but once you translate it into complete, the guy had no idea what to do next. So instead of feeling confident in his decision making, he just ended up submitting a support ticket, which really sucks because he was so close into fixing his website. So even if we take a step back and not look at the technical context of it, if we were to say, I am full, to talk about how much food I've eaten at the hawker centers here, we're speaking in the context of being hungry, right? So we're not hungry anymore, but if I use the word complete in here, at this point, I'm not talking about the context of being hungry. I'm talking about like, I'm so complete, I no longer have existential dread. And I'm not talking about how much food I've consumed. So hopefully that's enough proof that you shouldn't rely on machine translations. So let's look at how we started this ITN process. So here is a high-level view of how this works. This is our web application. It's a screenshot of our login page. And essentially, all of the product copy that you see here, any hard-coded string, now has to be converted into a JSON file in key value pairs. And this gives us the flexibility to switch between different languages because now we have structured data. And we just can leverage the translation keys that exist so that it can give you the correct response. So here is an example in code of what that looks like. We have some React code at the top. Instead, the old way was to have a save button with hard-coded text, but now instead we're using a third-party translator called Polyglot. And if you give Polyglot a specific locale string, so let's say we give it ENUS for English, and also a translation key, so common.save, it'll go through your translation files that you just created previously, and it'll return to you the correct localized string that you're looking for. So with this infrastructure in place, our main task was to get to 100% ITN completion of our code base. And I like to think about this part as a hunt for naked strings. It took a really, really long time to do this because we had a pretty large legacy code base for our front end. And essentially what you needed to do, so by the way, a naked string sounds weird, but it's just a technical term for hard-coded string. Anytime you would see a hard-coded string, so in this case account, we would extract that into our JSON file and then update the call site with Polyglot. So how did we find all of these? We didn't do it manually, even though it took a very long time. We leveraged using a IETN linter. So this helped us find all of our hard-coded strings through static analysis, which is really great because first, it gives us metrics on how many hard-coded strings we had left to tackle. And second, it creates this really awesome positive feedback loop to remind engineers that they need to internationalize their strings. And so this is great for me because I didn't have to physically go up to every developer and say, like, please internationalize all your strings, because I don't have the energy to do all of that. So the linter yelled at them for me. So static analysis took us, I would say, like 90% of the way there. But since developers are very creative and sneaky, they know how to silence the linters. So static analysis didn't actually catch all of the hard-coded strings that we had in our code base. So we thought about visualizing our application in a different way. So we pre-translated all of our JSON files with this garbled text. So every character has a bit of an accent on it. And this actually showed us where we had holes in our code base. So if a string was still hard-coded, it would show up as regular English. So in the corner, we have support. We knew exactly where we needed to find this hard-coded string. And this is good, but it's actually still kind of hard for a human to look at this screen and find out where the hard-coded strings are. So we decided to leverage color since it's way more expressive than just black and white text. And in this case, we can see all of these strings with their different IETN statuses. So here we're just looking for all the strings that are in red. And so our last task was to stress test our CSS. This was probably one of the funner parts of this. So we chose German as our first language to localize into, and the short answer for that is just because German words are 40% longer than English, and we knew that it would probably break our CSS. As front-end devs, we feel like our CSS is pretty good, but let's just see what happens. So in this case, we have a button in custom is in English, and then once we translate it into German, I'm not going to say it to butcher it, but it totally spills out of the button width. And so we put the theory to the test. Here we have our web app with our dashboard, and we wanted to see how German would break our nav bar. And the second we injected German strings into this nav bar, it completely exploded. Like this is nightmare for a front-end dev to see. So we have all this vertical space. There's weird like flexbox issues going on with our text. I don't even know what that super long string is, but it probably isn't the right translation for it. So this totally showed us where we had holes in our design. Maybe we should go back and reimagine our nav bar for longer characters. And also, if we couldn't do that, we would need to fix our CSS to make it more responsive. So back to our original question, what actually changes with IE18N? Did we actually do anything, right? So our code base is now flexible. We have the infrastructure to plug and play different languages. Now our product copy is not so rigid in being hard-coded strings, and it's now in structured data. And now our CSS is more responsive. But what about the impact on customers and developers through this process as well? Of course, our customers have a better experience. They have a better user experience. They no longer feel neglected from their needs because we are now catering to their specific region. And the process of creating all these IETN tooling actually helps build empathy in developers because it's super easy to forget about the user if you're just going to your day job, right? And through this process, it's actually something that I'm now very passionate about, and it helps me expose a lot of my biases and privilege as an English speaker, since most of the internet that I am using is catered to English speakers. And so with this, I feel like it's now our obligation as developers to build for all types of human beings, not just the ones that are convenient to us in our own little bubble that we have. And with that, this is something that I'm really passionate about and Cloudflare is really passionate about, so I hope you help me in developing for a better and more inclusive internet. Thank you.